Welcome to the podcast, Bo and Jon.
Thanks,
Great to
Peter.
be
It's good to be here.
Okay, well, let's kick it off by giving a little background. Bo, a lot of people know your background. So, Jon, let's start with you. Just tell us some of the career highlights to date before you got to Fintech Meetup.
Sure. Well, Peter and Bo, thank you so much for inviting me on. I started my career back originally selling diapers and orange juice for Procter & Gamble. So I was a brand manager back over in the UK. And after about 7 years, I was looking for my next adventure. And I came across this small little payments company that did cross-border global payments about 15, 16 years ago. And I loved it so much. I thought this whole thing was incredible, this combination of technology and payments.
Mm-hmm.
So I packed a bag, bought a one-way ticket, moved to the Holiday Inn in Chelsea, and grew the Americas for the company, which was called Earthport at the time. And eventually we sold that business to Visa. And then I went to JP Morgan and ran the partnership and investment group for the fintech partnerships for the corporate investment bank. So both on the fintech side and then on the financial institution side as well. Interesting.
And when did you start up at Fintech Meetup?
Yeah, so we started Fintech Meetup in 2021, just at in the middle of the pandemic. So my other fellow co-founders, Anil and Simran Agarwal, they're both entrepreneurs in the fintech space, but they also are very big event entrepreneurs as well. So they started Money 2020, Shop Talk and Grocery Shop, which are the biggest retail events. And then Caroline Farley, one of my other co-founders, and Ed Aikenhead as well on the technology side. So yeah, we started in 2021. We did 2 virtual shows, which really kind of blew people away when they came to experience it. And then we did our first in-person show in March of 2023.
Okay. And so did you know Anil and Simran before all this, or how did you guys come together?
Yeah, so I actually went to the first Money 2020, and I was just blown away by what they kind of accomplished, which was 10 years ago. And we'd always kept in touch. I'd always really admired what they'd done and how they approach building both teams and businesses. And it was one of those fortunate set of circumstances where I'd always wanted to work with them, really admired the businesses that they'd built, and was also just really, really just incredibly inspired by everything that was happening in fintech.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we launched Fintech Meetup, which really was driven by what we saw as a big need to help find and give the industry new ways for everybody to connect, collaborate, partner, to come together, to build all these different communities. And that's exactly why we launched Fintech Meetup.
Right. Well, we're going to dig into that in a little bit, but wanted to switch over to Bo for a minute. So, Bo, why don't you just give a 30-second background about yourself and what you do and some of your background?
Sure. I mean, I think our audience knows me pretty well, but just for those of you that don't, my name is Bo Brustkern. I'm CEO here at Fintech Nexus, and I've been at the helm since 2017. I've been in financial services my entire career, which goes back to 1995, and most of the early days was on the buy side, and then in 2006 started my entrepreneurial career, which eventually led to this media business that you and I are running, Peter.
Yes, indeed. Okay, so then maybe let's talk about how this deal came together. We're going to talk about the components of the deal a little bit, but just talk about the genesis. How do the discussions start for partnering with Fintech Meetup here?
Yeah, so I'll take that one. It was really interesting to receive an inbound from someone on Jon's team asking about advertising for Fintech Meetup 24 as they were getting ready to launch. And because we own a bunch of properties that have a great audience, one of which is Fintech Blueprint, which reaches 170,000 fintech leaders around the world. The inbound ended up on my desk, and I responded, and Jon and I ended up on the phone ostensibly to talk about marketing Fintech Meetup for spring of 24, but quickly turned to what's the best way to serve this community and the overlapping communities that we have. And we I think had quickly come to the conclusion that continuing to sort of anchor 2 large-scale fintech-oriented events in every spring from here on out was probably not in the best interest of our community. And so we quickly started talking about ways that we could partner, and it became much more interesting than just a simple sort of media relationship that the conversation started with.
So Jon, is that like, from your perspective, like Bo gave his kind of reading of the story, how, like, what was the sort of origins from the Fintech Meetup side?
Yeah, I think Bo's exactly right. We've long admired the work that you've both been doing from a leadership and industry perspective. We've gone to many of your events, and for us, I think it was a very unique set of circumstances where, Fintech Meetup had launched initially as a virtual event, then we'd done our first in-person events, and we've got pretty big aspirations in terms of where we think we're going to take Fintech Meetup, because we think the opportunity is really big. And it's really suited to the different way that we think about events and how we approach them. And then as we got talking with Bo, we really understood, the media opportunity that you were looking at and your plans for that. It just felt like there's a real complementary opportunity here for us to really drive and focus on the in-person event and Fintech Meetup and everything we want to do there, and for you to pivot towards the digital media business. So it came together very nicely. And ultimately, whenever you do a deal, it's really the person that you're serving or the community that you're serving. Are they going to be best served as an outcome of that partnership or deal? And I think that everybody's going to be absolutely delighted, both with Fintech Meetup and then all the great work and exciting initiatives that you have from a Fintech Nexus perspective.
Okay, well, let's maybe talk about the deal itself. What does the partnership entail? Bo, why don't you give us your perspective on that?
Sure. What it really does is it allows each of us to focus on the things that we do best. And what that means is that Fintech Nexus will part ways with its former relationship in terms of with its audience, in terms of the large scale events that we would hold on an annual basis. So probably most well known are the USA conference that happens in New York in the May timeframe, and the LATAM event that happens in Miami in the December timeframe. Those are annual events, they're large scale events. And so by vacating that as part of our business, then Fintech Meetup can essentially assume that role and be the defining spring event for fintech that gathers our audience, our mutual audience now, in the springtime. So March 3rd to 6th will be the 2024 Fintech Meetup event in Las Vegas, and attract both the LATAM audience and those that came to our big New York event. On the other side of that then is, well, we used to, as you know, Peter, we used to run all of these various efforts. We'd have these large scale events, but we're also growing a media business, and we had these aspirations to build, the data side and the online community side and all these things, which is, it's just a lot to do. And so the partnership is really just a codified effort to say, Fintech Nexus is going to go and focus on this digital community, and Fintech Meetup is going to focus on when that community gathers in person, what happens. And it's just as simple as that. It was a very simple transaction. I think the agreement was something like 15 pages in length, which for lawyers is just, stunningly short. And it was very easy to put together because, as Jon mentioned, this was really clearly in the best interest of our communities, and therefore in the best interest of each party.
Yeah, I agree with that, Bo. And I just to add one other thing to that, I think what's becoming clear is that when I started off in fintech 10, 15 years ago, probably like you guys, There were a few categories of services and solutions. Everybody would focus on issuing or acquiring or payments. And, we've mapped this out now, and there's been this huge explosion, 130 plus categories, a lot of fragmentation. And what we've seen is that people are really wanting to go to one or two big anchor events around the year. Fintech Meetup's the big event now for the spring. And then there'll be other events towards the end of the year as well. But exactly what Bo said is, we think having this one big fintech spring event, now the biggest for spring, that really serves the banking, fintech, lending, payments communities incredibly well. It's the best place to go, that in-person event, to kick off your whole year. So whether you want to build pipeline from a sales perspective, meet investors, create new partnership opportunities, you'll be able to do that at Fintech Meetup in person.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So then, Bo, I just want to be explicit here. And so what does this arrangement mean for previous Fintech Nexus attendees and sponsors, and those that even signed up already for our 2024 event, which we had announced a couple of months ago?
So what we've tried to do is create a very smooth transition for anyone who has committed to our 2024 event to transfer that commitment to the Fintech Meetup 24 event. And so far that has worked really well, because for the most part, our sponsors and attendees have said, well, this is great. Like, this frees up budget for me. I can now deploy, instead of trying to do both, Fintech Meetup and Fintech Nexus, and sort of, have this quite busy calendar. We've consolidated that one step for them. And it's simply an invitation. It's like, look, you've sponsored us, you've committed to us in some cases, to be a big part of our next year's event. Well, we have this new opportunity for you to be a big part of this other event. And some of our sponsors were not going to sponsor Fintech Meetup and now are. And some of our sponsors have said, look, this was the only spot in the calendar that we could attend. And so we're going to go ahead and cancel that. It's fine. It's like, those things do happen. And for the most part, a lot of our sponsors are just saying, this is great because I was feeling I had to do both, and now I can just concentrate on one. So it is very case by case, but we're inviting our sponsors and attendees to transfer their sponsorships and tickets to Fintech Meetup. And at the same time, obviously, we're opening up this new discussion, new for some of them, to say, like, Fintech Nexus is year-round news and analysis and community gathering, and we are still a very valid way to get in front of the people that you want to be in front of year-round. And when you want to punctuate that, in the springtime, March 3rd is your date. Like, show up in Las Vegas and come to Fintech Meetup so that you can gather and really engage in that meeting-centric format. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that was the detail you're looking for, Peter, yep, but it's working. I mean, our community is quite pleased with what we've done.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so, Jon, I want to actually delve a little bit into the 2024 event now. I went to the 2023 event and was blown away. I mean, I think the meetings program that you had there was, without question, the biggest and most comprehensive. And, I think there was like 1,000 tables of meeting tables. Right. And as someone who's really, we felt like we, as Fintech Nexus, had done a good job on doing a meetings program inside our event. You guys took it to the next level, and I think that was when I came back after that event. I said to Bo, "Wow, these guys are really, really good." And so anyway, let's talk about. I want you to talk about the meetings component, but talk about the other components of the 2024 event.
Yeah, definitely. And Peter, I've got some news on the meetings program, but I'll come to that in a second, which I think it will blow everybody away. When we started Fintech Meetup, we really asked ourselves the question, when you looked at the events landscape, what became clear to us is that, as I said earlier, the industry has changed so much It's a lot of fragmentation, so much investment, so much activity happening, just this huge explosion of solutions and services. But what became really clear to us is that many events, and not talking about your event, but many events in the industry were perhaps pretty specialized, but they hadn't really kept up with how the industry had changed and evolved. And that for us was a big opportunity. So, when we really step back and we say, why do people go to events? Ultimately, we believe it's all about connections, creating opportunities, having meetings, getting in front of people. And that can take many, many different forms. That can be a one-on-one meeting as part of a meetings program. It could be actually going to a content session and networking with your peers. There's a whole host of different ways to do that. So we really looked at them. We said, look, how are events currently serving the marketplace and the industry? And then what is the role for us in launching Fintech Meetup? And really what the heart of Fintech Meetup is three things. The first is we have an incredible meetings program, as you referenced. So at the last Fintech Meetup, we scheduled 30,000 meetings on site, over 1,000 tables. And the energy in the room is just mind-blowing. It's incredible. Firstly, when you say that you're going to do 30,000 meetings over 2 days, people look at you like you're completely nuts. That's never going to work. It's going to be a logistical nightmare. I can tell you. I
got to admit, I thought it was going to be a logistical nightmare when I went in, and I thought it wasn't at all. It was incredibly smooth.
Yeah. I mean, I think somebody said, it's organized chaos, but without the chaos. It just works incredibly well. And the reason why it works really well is that, firstly, we don't use off-the-shelf platforms and technology. So this platform has been built from scratch by some of the world's best engineers, with support and guidance and insight from people who have been in fintech banking and payments for 15, 20 plus years. So you've got the combination of amazing technology and industry domain expertise. So that works really well. The second thing is that it's not just about giving somebody an app. It's actually about a whole program that we put around it. So about 4 weeks before the event, we get people to start creating their profiles. They then can go in and select who they would like to meet with. We then share all those requests with everybody and people can opt in. But, everything is done on a very, very structured basis. And the reason that we do that is that what we're trying to do here is to catalyze and mobilize the whole fintech industry. And the only way you can do that is if everybody's using the same technology platform, doing the same steps at exactly the same time. Sorry, we will reach out a lot to make sure you're doing the right things. But the results are truly incredible and amazing. So at Fintech Meetup 2024, we'll schedule something like 50,000 plus meetings on site, 1,500 tables. And it will absolutely be incredible. We always ask people after they've done the meetings program, can you rate the meetings? Were they valuable? Were they not valuable? Or did you not know? And 92% of respondents said that the meetings they had were valuable. I think 4% were not sure, and then the balance were not. But this is all about what we're trying to do, is just get the whole industry together. So the first thing is just this incredible, mind-blowing meetings program. The second thing is then that we'll have our own Fintech Meetup agenda, speakers, content, 175 plus speakers. We've really taken a back to basics approach, covers 5 tracks, and we're really, really excited about that. And we're also thrilled, by the way, that Fintech Nexus is going to be one of our media partners at the event. And then the third thing is we also have things that we call table talks. And table talks are peer group moderated discussions. So let's say, for example, you want to get you've got a group of credit union chief executives together. What happens is that they come together and they actually talk with them amongst themselves around a particular topic, but it's moderated by that individual community. So for us, that's another form of content, but it's just actually peer group generated content. So that's a third thing. And then finally, the one thing that we're super excited about is the launch of what we call co-located events. We think this is the next big unlock for events. So, when you go to events, let's say you've got 5,000 people there, you may have 3,000 at the event, and you might have 2,000 outside the event. And typically, a lot of event organizers don't want you as a sponsor or an exhibitor or an organizing company. They don't want you to do anything at their events. They want to keep it within their walls and their confines. We actually have a very, very different view, and it's another way that we're going to disrupt the fintech event space. We want people to come to Fintech Meetup and to create their own events and co-locate them alongside Fintech Meetup. But then what we do is we're going to actually give you the capability and the power to invite people to the event, to list it, to manage the whole RSVP process, and importantly, to give the whole community visibility over everything that's happening right across the whole ecosystem of that one Fintech Meetup, March 3rd to the March 6th. We think this is going to be absolutely incredible. Again, uses common workflows, common technology, and there's no more going into a Google Sheet that's held somewhere in the web and trying to figure out all the latest parties, product announcements, and launches. You're just going to do it all through the Fintech Meetup platform. So we're really, really excited about that.
Yeah, it's going to be a very exciting event. And I know that you're at the Aria last year and the meetings were in 2 rooms and it was a little bit awkward, but now everything's it's at the Venetian, right, in one massive convention hall.
Yeah, that's right, Peter. And the Aria is a great venue. It's beautiful. It's a great way to do your first in-person event. We've always moved from year 1 at the Aria to year 2 at the Venetian. And we're excited about the Venetian because everything is more one single level. So you've got the exhibit hall, you've got the meetings program, table talks, everything's on one level content. And our objective is to make the Fintech Meetup exhibit hall the busiest exhibit hall in FinTech. One of the ways that we're going to do that is if you've got the exhibit hall here, you've got 45, 50,000 meetings happening right next to it. That's going to create a lot of busyness. So, all of these sponsors and exhibitors, they're really, really excited about that. We can't wait for them to see it.
Right. So, Bo, just turning back to you and talking about this transition that Fintech Nexus is on, and with the Fintech Nexus sponsors, and we've obviously had our own large exhibit hall for many years, and how are we transitioning those sponsors into the Fintech Meetup event in March?
Well, actually, one thing that's important to know is that during the negotiations, if you will, so the partnership negotiations, Jon and I and Caroline spent a lot of time talking about the mechanics of how this was all going to go down, because it's one thing for us to consider this a success if we reach an agreement that looks economically favorable to both sides, and we've got some give and take and yada yada. But what happens if it falls flat? And some of the things we considered were, okay, what do we do with the LATAM community? What do we do with our hosted banking and other FI community, where we're hosting investors to come to our events, and what do we do with our people? Like some of these teammates of ours, as you know, Peter, have been with us for a long time and are very valuable and have these strong relationships. And so we found really positive solutions to all of these what could be stumbling blocks. One of those was that both Sumit Pal and Mike Mikolakis and a couple of other of our teammates, but most notably those 2 senior business development managers, have moved over to Fintech Meetup, and they did so the weekend immediately following the deal, and that's really helpful for our clients. It's really helpful for our whole community to see that this wasn't a takeout acquisition. This wasn't Fintech Meetup, swiping us out at the knees. It was a true partnership, and we have come together in a way that is of service to our community. So if you were served by Sumit at Fintech Nexus, you're now served by Sumit at Fintech Meetup. He knows exactly the inventory that you were looking at, and he's mapped it with the help of Caroline to exactly the inventory that they have at Fintech Meetup. Not only that, but the day after the signing of our agreement, both Mike and Sumit flew out to Las Vegas for a site visit. So they've walked the floor. They know exactly where booth 482 sits. So these are all just really impactful, but one might think small details, but they're very helpful for our community. Caroline established a LATAM pavilion for our Latin American sponsors and exhibitors, and all these things were created so that we could create this smooth transition between our clients and the new home of Fintech Meetup for their in-person event needs.
Right, right. So, Jon, I want to just talk about the Fintech Meetup, the company, for a minute, because I know you're part of the Hive group, run by Mark Shashua, one of the most experienced guys probably in all of events, and someone that Bo and I actually know quite well from just dealing in the industry over the years. But tell us a little bit about sort of the, how you fit within the broader Hive group.
Yeah, definitely. And you're absolutely right, Peter, about Mark, his industry experience and knowledge. It's pretty incredible, particularly given that his father started what is now Hive as well. Mm-hmm. When we started Fintech Meetup back in 2021, we had a plan to, and still have the plan to, obviously grow the business very, very aggressively. Become, our aspiration is we want to be, and we think we will be, the #1 fintech event in the US, and after that, potentially other geographies as well. So we got really big ambitions, and it was a very interesting set of circumstances that came together when Anil and Mark had done a lot of business over the last decade, and we looked at it and we said, actually, there's an opportunity here for Hive to acquire Fintech Meetup. So we're part of the Hive group. Hive is one of the biggest events companies in the world. Runs about 100 events around the world, and the strategy is just very simple. We want to have the best market-leading events in every geography in which we operate and compete. So Fintech Meetup is one of those in the US. Our other events include Shop Talk. It's the #1 retail event, grocery shop. We just launched Shop Talk in Europe as well. And there's just so many other different segments. Break Bulk, Bet, which is a big education show. What's great for us being part of Hive is we're an incredibly small entrepreneurial business within the Hive organization. Hive's about 1,200 people. Fintech Meetup's 2025. Mm-hmm. But what it means is that we are able to access all of the balance sheet, all of the investment capacity and appetite to really grow the business. And we all have big goals, big ambitions for that. And Mark's really supportive of making it happen.
All right. So, but before we close, I really want to have you dig into the Fintech Nexus digital offerings. We've got it's part of our motivation for doing this deal was this. We've been talking about this for since really the middle of the pandemic, that the digital offerings is such a huge opportunity. So tell us a bit about what we have there.
Sure thing. Let's go back to the pandemic, and we won't spend long there. But one of the things that we learned was in the pandemic was that while our distribution model became illegal, we couldn't legally gather people together physically in 2020. Our purpose was still the same. Our mission was still the same. In fact, we were needed more than ever in times of chaos, in times of rapid change, which continue today. So back then, the rapid change was, well, we've got to get all these people on board. Digital wallets. We've got to distribute, billions of dollars to small businesses and individuals through various different programs. Those are the big challenges, the big changes of the day. The big challenges and changes are ongoing. Like, there is no end to the amount of opportunity and disruption that is happening in fintech, and all of us on this podcast are fully aware of that opportunity. So when you and I, Peter, were talking about this, our perspective, I won't speak for you because I want to hear your thoughts on this as well. But I'll say my perspective was, we're going to focus on a distribution model that really works for us. And that is going to be a primarily digital distribution model. We will still have small, intimate, call them events, but there'll be gatherings. But we won't have the large scale events anymore. What we will then focus on is the same stuff we've been doing for 10 years, which is news, analysis, and community. And in the background, since forever, we've been building this news site, which is now quite robust and really something. And when people now go to fintechnexus.com, they're not faced with an events site that has a little oh yeah, I can go read the news over here. They're faced with the news site, which has, how many articles have we published over the years? Tens of thousands.
Well, I think I know. I looked the other day. I've written 2,900 myself, so I don't know what the total is. It's like it's
so
well over
multiples
10,000.
of that, multiples of that for the whole team.
Yeah.
So very, obviously content forward, which is near and dear to our hearts. And then there's analysis, which we really leveled up in a huge way when we partnered with Lex Sokolin earlier this year, who's the founder of Fintech Blueprint. So now Fintech Blueprint, as a part of our family, has leading analysis on fintech. And now the audience coming to the community is 200,000+ industry leaders. That's a giant audience. If we're going to serve that audience or that community effectively, we really owe it to them to focus on doing a few things well. It's the news, it's the analysis, and it's the gathering of those individuals according to their needs. And I'll just dive deeper into that for a moment and say that not all 200,000 need the same thing. And we believe we have a core community at the center that needs something different than the next layer out and the next layer out and the next layer out. So what we're doing with this large community is inviting people into the center and inviting people to engage in different products and services that we are continuing to create. And we're creating them, as I said, primarily in the digital format. So exciting times, and we have a lot of creativity to unleash on this problem.
Indeed, we do. Okay, so in closing, Jon, I want to hear from you first. What are you most excited about when it comes to this new partnership?
I think it's, as I said earlier, I think it's one of these great partnerships that's come together through great opportunity, great circumstance. We're going to have a great media relationship and partner. We're going to be doing a lot of stuff together on the digital side. I think, what really excites me is getting the Fintech Nexus sponsors, exhibitors, attendees. Let's get them to experience Fintech Meetup in March at the Venetian. I think they're going to love it. I think they're going to be blown away. And, ultimately, I think there's a lot of future opportunities for both Fintech Nexus, for Fintech Meetup. And ultimately, we both exist to serve the Fintech banking, payments, lending communities. And providing we keep doing that and we keep wowing them with, great events, great digital content and great digital media, people are going to continue to come back and love what we do. So that's why we're here, and that's what excites and inspires me.
Okay, Bo?
Yeah, I mean, very much the same as what Jon just mentioned. I love the ability to focus and to serve our community with a lot of creativity in this digital channel. So we can create a lot of new ways to engage our audience that are agile and responsive to their needs. And so just having that ability and not being distracted by the large scale events, which do take a mountain of effort. So allowing Jon and his team to say, like, look, we're going to take that part and we're going to crush it. That makes me really happy, because then I can say, okay, Peter, let's go build this stuff over here and serve our audience year round in this other domain, which I think is what they deserve. How about you, Peter?
Well, for me, okay. So because interesting, I was reflecting on this just over the weekend, and I got into this. I got into fintech in 2010 when I started a blog that was writing about peer-to-peer lending, and that sort of grew, got a following, and then people said we should have a conference. So I kind of fell into the conference business, but I'd started a digital media company focused on fintech without really realizing it, and I'm really excited to get back to that. Now, as much as I've enjoyed doing these events, we've done 11 US events. We've done some China events, Latin America, UK. I think we've done like 9 or 10 in the UK. As you pointed out, they're a huge amount of work. It is like, it's hard to do much else. And when particularly for, I was heavily involved in all of the content aspects of putting on these events. And to now be able to just focus on digital media again, I I feel like in some ways a weight has been lifted, and I'm more excited about fintech than I've ever been before. And I think now we have a chance to really build the leading digital media brand in fintech, and partner with, and Fintech Meetup will be our partner on the large scale event side. Okay, well, with that, I will say thank you very much, Jon, for joining us today, and thank you, Bo. Appreciate your time today, gentlemen.
Thanks so much, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.
See ya.